Hello, welcome to another episode of Neo Feminine TV. Good morning, good afternoon, whenever you're listening to this. So this is a place for inspiration and guidance for an amazing life. My name is Shauna McGrath, and I'm really excited to chat with you today about today's topic. I've titled it Life as an Empath, Tips for Surviving and Thriving as an Empath. And you may have just heard this term thrown around. You may not even know what the fuck that means, but we'll talk about it today. We'll talk about what is an empathic person, what qualifies a person as that versus just being sensitive, and how do you know if you have qualities of being an empath, and how to just move through the world when you are either a very empathic person or a very sensitive person. I am excited to share about this topic because it's something more personal to me. And so I want to share some stories and some things that I've experienced in hopes that maybe it's something, maybe you've experienced something similar and you can take away from it. So but before we jump right in, I want to say hi to everyone that's listening on the live broadcast this morning. Good morning. You can always, good morning, Jennifer. You can always type in the chat box here. So as I'm talking, I'm always checking this and keeping an eye on it. So if I talk about something and you want to know more about it, you can just say, hey, what do you mean by that? Or let's talk about that. Or if you want to share something that resonates with you, I love that. And this broadcast, it's not just for me to talk at you. I'm really interested in making this so that it's a two-way street, whether that is that you're listening live or that you've sent in a question if you can't be on the live broadcast. And so I'll be taking questions and comments throughout, and then at the end I'll have a section where you can ask me anything related to today's topic or not. And so let me check just one thing to make sure. Okay, cool. And so I want to tell you a little bit about me first. If you're not familiar with me yet, again, my name is Shauna McGrath, and I am an astrologer and a counselor. I live in San Diego, and you can find more about me on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube under Neo Feminine Astrology. And so I like to talk about all different things related to astrology, spirituality, and then just living a life that feels cohesive with the physical world, the practicalities of life, and then also having a heart connection with yourself as well. So that's a little bit about me. And so let's jump right in. So why, number one, I have a lot I want to say about this, but number one, why is it important? And I am talking about this today because I've actually had several conversations over the past year, and then especially over the past month or so, as to how I'm finding that there are more and more people that are becoming very sensitive and that are connecting with their intuitive senses. And they don't, there's not like a user's manual. There's not like an owner's manual for this. And I've seen this happen because yoga is becoming more mainstream, meditation is becoming more mainstream. And so what I'm seeing happen, and I've experienced this myself, is when a person starts to connect more with themselves at a subtle level, and that can be through yoga, that can be through meditation, that can be through spiritual study, getting into astrology, anything that's like self-reflective and helps you connect with your higher self or your spiritual guidance team, God, whatever method that is, that tends to sensitize a person. And what happens is a person becomes more sensitive to their inner world, and then they become more sensitive to their outer world as well. And so it's kind of like the boundaries of what is tangible and what separates us those boundaries tend to soften. And so people become more sensitive, they become more empathic. And when that happens, it's a beautiful gift, and there's a lot of healing that can happen for the person and then for the other people in their lives as well. But it comes with a whole host of other things that happen, like, you know, so I'm going to back it up a little bit. So I'll talk about what an empath is too. So in a nutshell, an empathic person is a very sensitive person. They're sensitive to other people's emotions. They're sensitive to the energy of the room. And so when a person is empathic, and they can just have some empathic qualities, it's like a range. They're very sensitive to their environment. They're sensitive to the people that they're in relationship to. And so as you become more and more sensitive, it can kind of be like, whoa, like I'm feeling what's going on with this person, but maybe they're not saying it, and it makes me feel uncomfortable. Or it can become overwhelming to be around certain people who are very intense, or to be in a social setting where there's lots of people and lots of different energies. And so I find that when a person goes through a spiritual practice, or they start meditation or yoga, there's not really a follow-up for like how to deal with all of the things that happen when you become more sensitive. And so a part of what I want to share with you today is what I've found to be helpful for me, and what I feel is like the top three things, things that you can kind of use as like a foundation for stabilizing yourself, and which will help you move through the world in a way that makes it a little bit easier to be a sensitive person, and also really strengthens your sense of clarity and confidence too. And again, you know, this is what I found to work for me just through trial and error, and what I've seen be very successful for other people. But I'm also curious, you know, what's happened for you as well, so you can let me know. So I want to tell you a little bit, just my background as well, and share a few stories with you. So I think I've always been a sensitive person. When I was a kid, I really liked being introverted. I liked being by myself and doing little crafty things. And I was always really interested, though, in psychology and why people did the things that they did. And I was always very curious about the human condition. And so I don't know that I would say that that I identified initially with even the term of being sensitive or empathic. I thought I was just introverted. And when I was 26, I started to practice yoga. And I fucking loved it. I was like, this is amazing. The very first yoga class that I went to, it was like a 2-hour yoga class. It was really intense. It was in Yoga Beach, or Ocean Beach, Yoga Beach. It was in Ocean Beach in San Diego. And this woman did this whole, like, it was like for the chakras, for the energy centers in the body. And at that time, I had no idea what the fuck that meant either. But I just knew that it felt amazing, and I could feel my body in a different way. And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know what this is, but I need this. And I think that the part of me that was a very sensitive person connected with that. It connected with that experience that allowed me to connect more with my inner world. And it also helped me to clear my energy, which is something that's very important for people who are sensitive or empathic. And so I started doing yoga a lot. I started practicing it very passionately on my own at home, and I started going to different yoga studios. I eventually started practicing meditation at home, and I became also very passionate about meditation, and I started with just 5 minutes a day, and got really into it. And then a few years later, I also got more into learning how to use my intuition, and realized that that was a whole thing as well. And I didn't realize it as I was going through this process, but I started to, in retrospect, I started to become more and more sensitive. And for me, what that meant was I started to become more sensitive to the energy of other people, and understanding like what was going on with someone, even if they didn't say it. If someone was in a funky mood, especially my partner or my family, I started to get really like drawn into that. And I started to, especially around that time, there was like a lot of conflict within my immediate family that didn't involve me, but there was just like a lot of things. There was a lot of tumultuous things happening. And so I got very much drawn into the drama, so to speak. And which can happen when a person is very sensitive or empathic, because a person who has empathic qualities will want to help resolve the conflict because they feel it so much more, because they are very sensitive. Like they can feel the pain, they can feel the sense of discomfort when someone else is uncomfortable. And so by the time I was 28, I was really interested in in helping people. I wanted to do something that felt more meaningful than corporate real estate, which is what I was doing at that time. So I started like experimenting with life coaching, and I was getting more and more into fine-tuning my astrology skills, and I was teaching yoga and all of these different, and so like all of these things, I was doing all of these different spiritual practices, self-reflective practices. I was refining my energy. I was connecting more to myself, and I was connecting more to other people in a way that put me in a position of working with my energy and then working with their energy as well. And so this process sensitized me even more. You can think of it as like, I think of it as like if you have your headphones and they're all tangled up in your purse or something like that, and then you're like untangling them, and then it becomes more clear. And then when they're untangled, you can actually put them in and listen to the music. That's kind of like what I feel like I was doing. I was untangling parts of myself, and then I could listen more to my energy and to the subtle energy of the people around me. Over time, I found that I started to become very sensitive to my environment. Like I would tend to get more drained when I was in a very social environment for too long. Like if I was around a lot of people, like at a party or my work environment, I was always talking to lots of people. I had a variety of different jobs where I had like a front desk kind of part-time job. And it got to a point where I was like, man, like, why am I so goddamn sensitive? Like it felt like it took so much energy of me to go into an environment like that, where I was, especially at a front desk position, like talking to people and helping people and all of these things. And I was like, man, what is going on? Like, I feel like it didn't used to be this draining for me. And so I think that's a part of it too. And that's not to say that that's a permanent thing, but that is something that can happen when someone is very sensitive and they don't have the tools, the basic foundation, basically the self-care practices to come back to their energy, because the boundaries get more delicate. The person becomes more delicate. So that, I think that's all that I want to say about my history. I hope that's not TMI. I know that was a long story there. It's really been, let's see, in 2016, I started to really be like, all right, I got to figure this shit out, because I was finding myself to, like, I liked the way that I felt when I connected with my own energy. I had a solid yoga and meditation practice, which I think is a big part of, like, a big support system for being a sensitive person. But there was something else that was missing, and I wasn't quite sure what it was. And for me, that part was working on what I would call like the ethics work of being an empath. And a part of this is self-reflection, but a part of it is like working on, I worked a lot on how I set boundaries with people, how I view things, like my perspective on things, and giving people like emotional, like like setting up an emotional boundary that's healthy. And for me, a lot of it was also really owning and being a good steward of my own energy, my empathic energy. And it's not really about controlling it, but I was thinking it's more like being a good steward of my own energy. And so I'll talk about this a little bit more because it's it's one major part of the 3 things that I think are really important for sensitive people to do and to work with. But that was kind of the missing piece for me. And so I've worked a lot on that. And I think that's a big missing piece in general in the spiritual community is how do we use our energy? How do we work with our energy, not like in an intuitive sense and working with the chakras, but like how do we interact with people when we have to go to work, when we have family stuff, when we want to connect with our partner, but then also on our own energy, like how do we move through the world? And I think that's a big part of what I see missing. And that's why I wanted to talk about this today, because I want to talk about some like literal real life examples as well. So that is that. And so I saw Jennifer put a post here in the chat. I've known I'm an empath for about 4 to 5 years now, and I feel like I've come back around to learning what my feelings feel like in my body versus what others' feelings feel like. Awesome. And I've started owning up to that. I started owning up to my own emotions again. For a long time, I would blame others for how I was feeling. Ooh, that's good. I want to talk about that. I have wondered before if I have narcissistic tendencies because of this sensitivity. I'm very resistant to conflict and confrontation, and so I tend to hide away when the energy is uncomfortable. Okay, so I love what you say here, Jennifer. I want to talk about that a little bit. I'm gonna take a sip of water. So I like what you say here because number one, I think it's awesome just that you realize, oh, I am a sensitive person. I'm an empathic person. And I think that what you say about learning what your feelings are versus what other people's feelings are is important. And the biggest thing is owning your emotions and not blaming other people for how you were feeling. And this is something that I see a lot. This is actually one of my pet peeves for when people talk about being an empath, because I see people, I've seen people talk about being an empath and being like, oh, like I'm feeling so-and-so's feelings and they're putting their stuff on me. And it kind of, I don't like it for 2 different reasons. Number one, it's blaming the other person for something that they're just living their life, like they're not trying to put their emotions on me. They're just existing. And it all, so I don't like that whole, like, us versus them kind of mentality. And then also it puts the empathic person in a victim role. And this is really dangerous because empathic people who have these qualities are already super sensitive. And there's already this risk of going into some form of like power dynamic or codependency and that kind of thing. And so this is why it's so important to look at being an empathic person as a gift, something that we need to be a steward of, something that we need to be like a caretaker of. And so I really love that you say that you've owned up to, okay, that's what they're feeling and this is what I'm feeling, and that you're the manager of that. And I don't want to downplay that sometimes it feels like overwhelming to be around someone else's emotions. I think that, and I know I've experienced this sometimes, I have to remove myself from a situation because it is, I feel as though kind of like I'm spinning in the room and I don't feel connected to my own energy. So, I do what I have to do in order to take care of myself. And that may look like going home early from a party if I need to, or ending a conversation if it feels like I can't communicate in that moment and then resuming it at another point. And I also want to speak to what you said. I think I have narcissistic tendencies because of this sensitivity. So what I'll say about that is a person, so the definition of being, having narcissistic qualities is when a person is so hypersensitive that they put everything back onto themselves. And I think that this is also like where there's a range. I think there's a very big difference between being sensitive and being overwhelmed by emotion and being a narcissist and turning everything back onto yourself. And so, you know, I'm not an expert on the term narcissism. I know enough about it to say that I think that what you're talking about, Jennifer, is more about sussing out boundaries, and it's more about claiming what is yours versus what is someone else's. I wouldn't take what you're saying necessarily as being a narcissistic tendency, but, you know, I think something good to look at and something good to be aware of, because I think it really comes down to the piece of self-reflection and knowing like where it is that you assign value to things, where it is that you assign responsibility to other people versus yourself. Like that really sounds more of what that is. And I don't think it's narcissistic to be sensitive. I don't think it's narcissistic to feel like you need to do certain things to take care of yourself. When that becomes at the expense of other people, that's when, you know, it becomes an issue. So that's that. And then Caitlin in the chat says, I never really considered myself an empath until recently when I saw a description of different types of empaths. The only thing I'd ever heard about empaths was all about emotional empath, and I never really connected with it. But I do very much identify with the energetic empathic side of things. Yeah, so I love that, Caitlin. So it is such a spectrum, and there's so many different ways of being that way. Yeah, I think, so I'll tell you a little secret. Up until very, very recently, I felt really uncomfortable with identifying myself as a person who has empathic qualities or an empath person. And it's kind of funny because I would even, like, my therapist would like say things like, you know, well, you're an empathic person, so blah, blah, blah. And it like made me feel uncomfortable. I was like, no, I'm not that way. Because I had this idea of what it was. And I would often, I think initially when I started hearing about that term also, like you said, Caitlin, I would hear it described as like literally feeling the sensation of other people's feelings inside your body. And that was kind of more the focus, or where it almost felt like more like clairvoyance or clairsentience than anything. And those can be a part of it. But I think that it can also just be like being really sensitive and wanting to, and being so sensitive that you feel some sort of emotional discomfort if there is other discomfort in the room and that kind of thing. And it can just be being very sensitive in general. So yeah, so it's only very recently that I think maybe in the past year that I've been okay with using that term when it comes to myself, even though, like, you know, over the past few years, so many of my clients are empathic people or intuitive people or highly sensitive people. So yeah, words are funny. Words can be a very loaded thing sometimes. And then we have another listener in the comment in the chat box as well. Thank you guys for, it's always nice. Like, I love hearing your perspective because like I'm just one person. And like I said, things like this, there's a range of different experiences and we're all different. So she says, hello, I live with an empath and it recently has caused conflict in our living situation. Oh no. There was a conflict between myself and another roommate, and she became the mediator, blocking myself and the other roommate for getting to the root of the issue. It ended up feeling like she, my friend that is an empath, became very two-faced. I am at a point where my feelings toward the relationship has moved away from how trusting it was before the incident. Could you explain how I can better understand the situation in a different light other than seeing her as two-faced? Okay, yes. I love this question. I want to talk about this. I'm going to take a sip of coffee first. Okay. So number one, I'm really curious about the two-faced feeling that you got about this, or the fact that you felt that she became very two-faced. And so when I hear the term two-faced, to me that means that maybe she did one thing and then, or she said one thing and then did another, or like maybe she did one thing and then did something totally different. Like, she seemed to tell us both what we wanted to hear. Okay. All right. So this is a downfall of being a very sensitive person. But I think she just understood us very well. Okay. So this is really what I call the ethics work of being an empathic person, because typically empathic people, they're very sensitive. They can, like you say, tune into what it is that other people are feeling. And I find that unless that highly sensitive people, unless they have a very strong sense of self-confidence and a strong sense of boundaries, there's a vulnerability towards people-pleasing. And what this can look like is telling people what they want to hear. It can look like saying yes when you want to say no, or saying no when you want to say yes. And this can totally come off as being two-faced. It can totally come off that way. And, I don't know this person, and I don't know, I'll never know all of the intricacies of the conflict and the, the hurt and things like this. But what I would say is, I would imagine just what you've told me here, that, it sounds like she told you both what you wanted to hear because possibly she didn't want hurt your feelings, or she knew what to tell each of you in order to satisfy your concerns. That she, she was like, okay, this person really wants to know or hear this, so I'm going to tell them that, and that's going to make them happy, and that's going to satiate them. And then this other person, I'm going to tell them this. And so really, you could look at it as two-faced. What the feeling that I'm getting from it is that maybe she didn't like conflict, and so she did what she thought would be like not dealing with any kind of confrontation. That's very like people pleasing. That can be a tendency of someone who is empathic, because the sensitivity is like, oh my gosh, if things get too intense as far as conflict or confrontation, it can feel overwhelming. And this is, everything that I'm saying is not to excuse if she did something that, wasn't right or was hurtful. It's not excusing the behavior. Like we're trying to understand what's happening. And Caitlin says, boundaries are so key. Yes, I 100,000% agree with you. I've totally found myself trying to manage other people's conflicts for them because I just want it to be over as soon as possible. It definitely takes work not to do so. Yeah, totally. And I think, it's hard to be a roommate with empathic or sensitive people. I got to tell you, I had or let's see, I rented a room once for a very short period of time from a woman who was highly sensitive, highly empathic, highly intuitive. And I was like, oh, this will be great. We'll get along awesome. And it was not great. It was a cluster fuck. It was fucked up. And it was fucked up because my sense is she didn't like having another person in her home because she was so sensitive to it. And so she got upset with me, but it was like for reasons that were like very odd and very strange. And so, but she didn't want to talk about it. And so it was really weird. It was like the weirdest situation. So anyways, so your question, my dear, is how do I help or approach her to help her develop these boundaries to strengthen empathic abilities? She is a very genuine person, and this was out of left field for me. Okay. Let me think about that. So I think, to be honest, I think that the question that you're asking is not, I don't think this is the right question. And I say that because there's nothing that you can do to help her. There's nothing that you can do to, she's not going to develop boundaries unless she wants to develop boundaries. And she's in charge of her own shit, so to speak. But what I will say, the question that I would be, I think the best question here is how, what do I want to say here? I think it's definitely a question of boundaries. I think it's how do you set the boundaries? And what's coming to mind also is asking her questions. And so I think a part of this is setting the boundary for what's appropriate for you. Like if there are things that she has done or said that are not appropriate, how do you communicate that is not okay? How do you communicate what it is that you want? And then I would really be like, hey, so, what's going on with you? Like why, if there is something that she did that wasn't appropriate, especially if it feels out of left field, I would approach it with curiosity. Because it sounds like there was people pleasing and wanting to avoid a conflict. And so the best way to approach a person who is scared as fuck about conflict or confrontation is to approach them in a friendly and curious way. Like, hey, what's going on? Caitlin says, yeah, develop your own boundaries with her. I think this is such a great opportunity for both of you to figure out how to be, I don't see this as a negative thing. I see this as a really great opportunity to work with how do you each support each other, and how do you each do that in a way that has healthy boundaries without blaming each other. I think that it can be so goddamn uncomfortable to set boundaries with a person, but when we do, that person actually respects us a lot more, as long as those boundaries are set in a kind way. A kind and firm and clear way. Clear is important. Jennifer says, I would suggest talking with her and telling her how you feel. I think you should also talk to your other roommate about the conflict and see if you can get to the root of the problem. Okay, this is really great because it's been weighing very heavy on my heart because she is so close to me. Thank you so much for bringing this to a lot of clarity. Awesome. Definitely good luck. I think that, totally being clear on the boundaries, and then being curious about what did I think Jennifer said? Yeah, what is the root of the problem? What is really going on here? And I think that a lot can be done when we strip away the surface of what's happening. It's like, okay, what's really going on? And who knows, maybe there's something else in her life that is going on that doesn't even involve the whole roommate situation. So, and then Serena says, yes, I totally identify with the conflict phobic person. I like how you say to approach it with love and view it as an opportunity to grow. Yeah, totally. And, you know, I have been amazed sometimes at how when I ask for what it is that I need from a person, when I say, not like when I tell them what to do, but when I'm like, hey, I would really love it if we did this, or I would really love it if either you did this or if I was able to do this. Like sometimes the person's just like, okay, you know, and sometimes it's not that easy, of course. But I'm always amazed at how much easier things are when I'm confident about what it is that I want and I don't beat around the bush. So thank you so much for asking that question. I love hashing out stuff like that because, you know, it's real life stuff. Okay. So one thing that I really wanted to talk about today that I want to share with you is basically like my three tips basically for living as an empath. And this is kind of like, this is something that I've just recently been that I've been creating in my head. And what I'm going to share with you is not something that I made up, that initiated with me. Different spiritual practitioners, I think, have said these different things in so many different ways, and this is just my way of looking at it. But I think that there are three things that an empathic person should have in their life in order to have like a sustainable lifestyle. And so I'll tell you what they are, and then I'll break them down and we'll kind of hash it out. So number one is body work. Number one is connecting to your physical body. And this looks like any kind of physical movement, like exercise or like dance or like yoga or even like getting massages, anything like that, that is like number one, the physical, your muscles, your bones, connecting to that piece of you. Number two is the energy work. And this looks like meditation. It looks like even getting things like Reiki done and that kind of thing. But it's like connecting with your individual energy, connecting with your higher self, with your spiritual guidance team, and clearing your energy through that process. And then number three is a lot of what we talked about already, the ethics work. And I don't know that I necessarily like the term ethics work, but that's what came to mind this morning. So that's what I'm saying. And the ethics work of being an empath looks like boundaries. It looks like having clarity on what's yours versus what someone else's, and how you manage all of that when things feel weird or murky or when there's a conflict. I was thinking about how in yoga philosophy there's this code of ethics that's called the yamas and the niyamas. And the yamas and niyamas are basically guidance for how to live like a moral life. You know, it's things like don't harm anything, and don't use moderation, don't be greedy, stuff like that. And I was thinking how sensitive people and empathic people, we need something like that. We need like a code of ethics. And so I think, if I were to imagine what that would look like for very sensitive people, it would look like having boundaries and taking responsibility for one's own emotions, and then like engaging in open conversation when things feel unclear. I think that's such a huge, important part of being a human being and being a very sensitive human being. And so I want to break these down a little bit more. I think these three things are so important because they connect the entirety of you to yourself. Like they connect you to your inner world, your outer world, and then it really allows you to be in the realities of life, like your family life, your work life, your spiritual life, to like move through all of the different places in a way that's manageable, in a way that doesn't feel so overwhelming. And I think, so number one, I think the body work is so key. And, to be honest, I don't know why this is, but it is a thing. I mean, it goes back to the base, like the root chakra, the base of our energy is to connect to the earth, to connect to the physical plane. And that's important. We need shelter and food and water and sustenance, and we need money to buy the things that we need. We have to participate in this material world. And the way to do that is initially, I think, through strengthening and connecting with your physical body. Marianne Woodman talks about this idea of feminine consciousness, and she talks about connecting spiritually, not just with spirituality in the God sense, but spirituality in like feminine consciousness, like in being, and we all have feminine energy inside of us, whether we're male or female. It's not about gender, it's about energy. And so she talks about connecting with your feminine energy, with creative energy, and that a person needs to have a strong ego and a strong body in order to do that, and that self-reflection and spiritual practice really needs to be paired with physical work as well. And again, this can look like so many different ways, and I'm curious, what you find. Maybe you already know what works for you. Maybe you're figuring it out. I think the biggest thing is that I've found the past few years, especially for me personally, that when I focus on strength building in my body, that actually translates to me being able to improve my energetic boundaries. And I know that sounds a little out there, but everything's all connected. It's like a spider web. When one part tugs, then the other part tugs. And so for some people, it is dance, and for some people, it's stretching and yoga. For some people, it's maybe surfing or walking. I found for me that I need to do a lot of core work, and I've always had softer core muscles, which is the solar plexus, which is boundaries and confidence and self-worth and all of these things. So you know a little bit more about me by knowing that. But everyone's different. And so I found that I've really been super intentional on building core strength and doing strengthening exercises specifically for that. And I felt stronger, and it's crazy. It's like, even though I haven't been as thorough with doing yoga, that has actually translated to stronger yoga and stronger ways of asserting myself and feeling more confident. Like I feel more in my body. It's pretty amazing. Let's see, you guys left a few comments in the chat box. Jennifer says, reality is a hard thing for me to accept a lot of times. Like the day in, day out sort of routine bores me to a point of non-action. I do yoga because it's more of an addiction. What else can be done to connect with this reality? Oh, that's such a good question. So I'm going to take a sip of coffee. So number one, so two different things I want to say about this, Jennifer. I think it's an excellent question, because I think some people, sensitive people, when there is a disconnect with the body, it can feel kind of like flatline sometimes. Or like, I've talked to people also who feel like, they're like, I don't want to be here. Like, I don't want to be in this physical world, because either because it doesn't feel as interesting as the subtle world, or it feels like painful sometimes. And so I think a part of what I want to say about that is, I think that sometimes people go through different highs and lows of feeling that way. And, I know that I've felt that way as well. Sometimes for a long period of time, where it just kind of felt like something was missing, and it's not like I didn't like my life, but I just felt like, I don't know, like I was like, like it would be nice if I just didn't exist. I know that sounds weird to say. But I felt that way. And so I think a part of that is sometimes it may just be like the season of what's happening right now. Unless it's more chronic, I don't know. But I think that is natural sometimes. And so what I would say, what else can be done to connect with this reality? It's really about connecting with sensations that feel pleasurable. And so I think this can be a fine line, because pleasure can go into like an, quote unquote, addictive kind of, like pleasure can be used for numbing oneself if it's not done consciously. And so I think the key here for you, what I would really suggest is connecting to activities that you find very pleasurable. And this, ideally, if they're like physically, sensually pleasurable. And because I think that, there's like pleasure in, like going for a walk or like creating something, but like I see this more as like pleasure in like eating your favorite food, something that feels very luxurious, or like doing self-massage with a scented essential oil that you really like, or something like that. Like these kinds of things are what's coming to mind. And I don't know, you'll probably come up with more things. And it probably, so I would imagine that it may feel kind of like stupid or boring, or like, why am I doing this? But I would maybe, like, what's coming to mind also is like, commit yourself to doing something like that, maybe 5 minutes every day or something. And to treat it like a spiritual practice. So I don't know, maybe you like chocolate and you're like, okay, I'm going to eat a Hershey's Kiss and really enjoy it for like 5 minutes every single day as like a dessert or something. Yeah, it's like a self-love ritual. And so I think this is so important, because even things that we like, our society is so fast-paced. And I find this for myself. I will find myself rushing through things that I enjoy, and then I kind of start to like numb out or space out on it. And I think a big part of body work and connecting with the body is slowing down enough to really feel the sensation and thinking about it, as like a self-love ritual or a meditative ritual. It does not have to be extravagant. It does not have to be long. We're going for like quality over quantity here, is what I would say. So yeah, that's what I would say about that. And Serena says, without body movement, one can become stagnant. Yeah, totally. Body movement, it's crazy. Like everything's connected. When you move your physical body, it moves the energy. And to speak to Jennifer, what you've said as well, I think sometimes body work, when we move our body, it can move the energy, but then at other times what we need is maybe not to move as much. And so I think like that's something for us to keep in mind too, is yes, we want to move the energy, and then we want to do it intentionally as well, so that it's not just mechanical going through the process and that kind of thing. So yeah, so that's what I'll say about that. That being said, don't take it too like, you don't have to get this all perfect, I guess is what I want to say. It's a constant evolution. And, I'm still refining what works for me and what doesn't work for me. And that changes from season to season, week to week. Every day is a little bit different. So that's my timer. Oh my gosh. I had so much fun chatting with you guys today. This was a really fun episode. I want to draw a card for us as a little bit of guidance on this issue. And let's see. So to summarize, as I'm pulling the card. To summarize, there's a full spectrum of being a sensitive person, of being an empathic person. There's many different ways that it can manifest, and it can change over time. The biggest things that you can do for yourself that I find that work really well for me are the three things, which is body work, connecting with your physical body, energy work, which is connecting with your energy system, having solitary time, doing meditation, preferably on a regular basis, and then the ethics work, which is very much about boundaries and deciding to be responsible for your own energy and sussing out how that works in real life, which is also like an ongoing thing. I don't think that we're ever perfect at all of these things and have it all figured out. As life situation changes, we change and our perspective changes. And so it is like an ever moving target. Okay, so I'm going to pull an animal card for us, and I'll show it up I'll hold it up in the video, and I'll describe it as well. The way that I've been really liking interpreting cards is when I pull the card, I'm intending that it's representative of the energy now. So it's like, okay, what is the energy now? And what is that animal like? How does it reflect what's happening now? And then what does that animal benefit from? So it's kind of like you're thinking, I am this animal, versus the animal's telling you to do something. Yeah, I love this deck too. It's super, super beautiful. Okay. So I haven't picked it, so we're going to, this is a surprise to me too. Oh, shit. Oh, you guys are going to love this card. Okay, so this is the Vulture. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, so I'm holding it up. I love this card, and I will tell you why. So first, this card, it's a picture of a vulture, and he's sitting on a little branch, and he's kind of just chilling right there. He looks pretty calm. He looks like he's just, waiting or looking, and he's got this really interesting like purple. These cards are they're drawn with watercolors, so he's got like this really soft purple watercolor around his head and his wings, and it's darker towards the bottom and then lighter towards the top. Yeah, it is a beautiful card. So the Vulture is a card that it's like the death card in tarot, which is also a positive card despite the name. So the Vulture is kind of like nature's composting action. The Vulture is about something that has died and how that thing falls away, and it's about like the sense that like process between something falling away and then new life coming to action. It's about let's see, one of the ladies here says transformation through decomposition. Transformation through decomposition. Yes, it's like death, birth, renewal. It's that whole entire process. And I think this is such a beautiful card for what we've talked about today, because people who are sensitive and empathic, they're really just constantly working with energy, consciously, unconsciously. Like when you are feeling energy, you're processing it, you're transforming it, and then you're decomposing it, and then something new comes in. And so vultures, that's what they do. They transform energy. They take something that seems like it's not so great, and then they turn it into something amazing and beautiful. And so if you're curious about the Vulture, I would definitely Google that and look up more information on that particular animal, but I think it's a lovely card. So that completes today's broadcast of Neo Feminine TV. If you want to stay tuned on more episodes, I do this every Thursday at 9 a.m. Pacific time. You can find out more information under, if you go to www.neofemininetv.fireside.fm, and I'll have links in the description box to some of the things that I talked about today, and I'll link to the deck that I used today as well. If you want to connect with me more, you can do that again at neofemininetv.fireside.fm. You can also find me on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube under Neo Feminine Astrology. And then another tip, something that would be useful for people who have listened today, is I also am offering my meditation membership. And so I'll have more information on that on my website, and I'll link it down below, but that is where you get a weekly guided meditation. It's about 10 to 15 minutes, and it's every single week with a different theme based on the astrology. And so it's something that's nice if you're just getting into meditation and these things and you want to learn more about it. So wonderful. Well, thanks everyone for listening live. And yeah, so great to have you here. Really good conversation today. Really great work. And if you're listening to the replay, thanks for being here, and I will connect with you soon. Have a wonderful weekend. Namaste.